Ethan had never been the kind of man who asked for more than he could handle. He had learned early in life that dreams were fragile things, and only those who held on tight could see them come true. As a single father, his days began before sunrise and ended long after the stars filled the sky. Every morning he woke up to the sound of his daughter's soft breathing in the small bedroom of their modest apartment. He would pack her breakfast, get her ready for school, and walk her to the bus stop with a smile that hid his weariness. After that, he would head straight to his tiny garage, a place that smelled of old oil and burnt metal. But to him it was more than a workshop. It was a reminder of his late father, who had taught him how to hold a wrench before he was even tall enough to see over the hood of a car. Ethan's garage was nothing more than a converted shed on the edge of town. The walls were patched with sheet metal, and the roof leaked whenever the rains came down hard. Yet inside, the tools were neatly arranged and every nut and bolt seemed to have its place. He worked on old sedans, rusty pickup trucks, and the occasional family van. His customers were mostly working-class people who couldn't afford big repair bills at dealerships. Ethan was fair and honest, charging only what was necessary, often less than he should. Some days he went home with hardly any profit, but he never complained. He told his daughter that one day he would build a repair shop so fine that even the fanciest cars would come rolling in, and no one would ever laugh at the idea of a small-town mechanic dreaming big. His daughter, Lily, believed in him more than anyone else. She was only 8 years old, but she had the kind of faith that could lift mountains. She would sit on a stool in the corner of the garage, swinging her legs and watching him work for hours. "Daddy, you can fix anything," she would say, her eyes shining with pride. Those words were like fuel for Ethan's soul. Whenever exhaustion pressed on his shoulders, Lily's voice reminded him why he kept going. Still, the world outside was not as kind as his little girl's heart. Ethan knew that to truly provide for her future, he had to grow beyond his broken shed. He had ideas of building a proper repair center with modern equipment, a place where even luxury cars could be trusted in his care. But ideas alone did not build walls or pay for machines. Money did, and money was the one thing he never had enough of. After weeks of debating with himself, Ethan finally decided to approach the man who held the power to change everything, Mr. Crawford, the CEO of a luxury car dealership chain. Crawford was a name that carried weight in the city. He was known for his towering offices, his expensive suits, and his sharp tongue. People said he could smell weakness from across a room, and once he decided you were beneath him, he would never take you seriously again. Ethan was nervous, but he knew this was his only chance. On the morning of the meeting, Ethan put on his best shirt, one that Lily had ironed with her small hands. He looked at himself in the cracked mirror and tried to see the man he wanted to become rather than the one who stood in front of him. He kissed his daughter on the forehead before leaving. "Today is important," he told her. She smiled and whispered, "You've got this, Daddy." Walking into Crawford's office was like stepping into another world. The lobby alone was bigger than Ethan's entire apartment. Glass walls reflected polished marble floors, and luxury cars gleamed behind velvet ropes like pieces of art. Ethan felt out of place, with grease stains that never truly left his hands no matter how hard he scrubbed. But he walked tall, clutching the folder that contained his plans for a new repair shop. When he was finally ushered into the CEO's office, he found Crawford sitting behind a massive desk, flipping through papers without looking up. The man barely acknowledged his presence before muttering, "Yes? What is it you want?" Ethan cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. "Mr. Crawford, my name is Ethan. I run a small garage on the edge of town. I came here today because I want to propose an idea. I know cars, sir. Luxury cars, sports cars, classics. I have a gift for fixing what others can't. With your backing, I could build a repair shop that would bring in customers who trust your brand but need real solutions." Crawford finally looked up, his eyes sharp and cold. He let out a laugh. Not the kind that welcomed humor, but the kind that cut deep. "You?" he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You want me to invest in a man who smells like oil and comes from a shed? Do you know how many men like you walk in here with wild dreams? Do you know what separates them from me? I didn't waste my time on pipe dreams. I built an empire. And you? You want me to put my name next to yours?" Ridiculous, the word struck Ethan harder than any punch could. He tried to respond, to explain that his skills were real, but Crawford was already shaking his head. A man like you should fix tires and be grateful for the scraps people throw you. Don't ever come back here with fantasies of being more than what you are." Ethan stood frozen for a moment, his pride burning inside him. He wanted to argue, to prove himself, but the laughter in Crawford's voice told him nothing he said would matter. Gathering what little dignity he had left, he closed the folder and walked out. Each step echoed like a reminder of how far he still had to go. Outside, he leaned against the railing, breathing heavily, his heart crushed. For a brief moment, he thought about giving up. Maybe Crawford was right. Maybe dreams like his were not meant for men like him. But just then, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from Lily's teacher, a photo of his daughter holding up a picture she had drawn in class. It showed Ethan standing in front of a big shiny building with a sign that read, "Dad's Repair Shop." She was smiling so wide, proud of the dream she believed in. Ethan's eyes grew wet, but not with defeat. He clenched his fists, feeling the roughness of his hands, the same hands that had kept cars alive when others gave up. He whispered to himself, "I'll show him. I'll show them all." That night, when Lily asked how the meeting went, Ethan knelt beside her bed, brushing her hair gently. "He didn't believe in me," he admitted. "But you do, and that's all I need." She hugged him tight, and he knew that his battle had just begun. The next few weeks after the humiliating meeting with Mr. Crawford were some of the hardest for Ethan. He felt the sting of rejection every time he looked at his small garage. The laughter of the CEO echoed in his mind like a cruel reminder of his place in the world. Yet, even in his lowest moments, Ethan refused to let despair win. He had made a promise to himself and to Lily that he would not stop fighting. He still woke up early every morning, still fixed the broken cars that came to his door, and still greeted his daughter with a smile, even when inside he felt crushed. One chilly evening, just as Ethan was closing up his garage, a tow truck pulled into the dusty lot. The driver, a man named Joe, who often stopped by for coffee and a chat, waved at him with a puzzled expression. On the back of the truck was a sleek black sports car. Its polished body gleamed under the fading light, but its engine sounded dead. Ethan raised his eyebrows. He had never seen a car like that in his garage before. "Where did you get this beauty?" Ethan asked, wiping his hands on his work rag. Joe shook his head. "From Crawford's dealership. Can you believe it? They said this thing's a total loss. Electronics fried, gearbox locked, engine won't start. Their mechanics gave up. The owner's furious and Crawford doesn't know what to do. He told the customer the car couldn't be saved. The guy wanted it scrapped, but I thought of you." Ethan looked at the car with wide eyes. It was a machine most mechanics would only see in magazines. He slowly walked around it, running his fingers across the hood. "They said it can't be fixed?" he whispered. Joe smirked. "That's what they said. But I've seen you work miracles, Ethan. Thought maybe you'd want to take a crack at it. Worst case, it doesn't start. Best case, you prove them wrong." Ethan felt his heart race. This was his chance, the first real chance to show what he was capable of. With trembling hands, he agreed. Joe helped him push the car into the garage before driving away, leaving Ethan alone with the sleeping giant. That night, Ethan didn't go home. He called Lily and told her he'd be late. She simply said, "Fix it, Daddy. I know you can." Her faith gave him the strength he needed. For hours, he worked in silence. The only sounds, the clinking of tools and the occasional hiss of steam. He examined the car like a doctor studying a patient. Every wire, every bolt, every part told him a story. He discovered mistakes the dealership's mechanics had overlooked. Their problem was that they relied too much on machines and manuals. Ethan relied on instinct, patience, and years of experience. He improvised, repairing circuits by hand, adjusting gears with precision, and cleaning components that others had dismissed as useless. By dawn, Ethan's face was streaked with sweat and grease, but his eyes burned with determination. He slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and prayed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a roar that shook the walls, the engine came to life. The car purred like a beast awakened from slumber. Ethan's heart soared. He had done what a multi-million-dollar dealership claimed was impossible. When Joe returned in the morning, he nearly dropped his coffee cup at the sight of the car running smoothly. "Ethan, you're unbelievable," he shouted, clapping his friend on the back. "Do you realize what this means? Word's gonna get around." And word did get around. Within a week, 2 more luxury cars were brought to Ethan's garage, each declared unfixable by Crawford's team. A Rolls-Royce with a dead transmission, a Bentley whose engine had seized. Ethan tackled them one by one, staying up late into the night, refusing to give up until they were restored. And each time, he succeeded. Soon, whispers began to spread through the city. Wealthy car owners who had lost hope of ever driving their prized possessions again started asking about the mysterious single-dad mechanic who could fix the unfixable. They came quietly at first, not wanting to admit that a small-town man could succeed where official dealerships had failed. But once they saw the results, they could not deny it. Ethan kept a notebook where he recorded every car he saved. 1, 2, 3. The list kept growing. Within months, he had repaired dozens of high-end vehicles, each worth more than his entire garage. By the time he reached 47 cars, the combined value was staggering. Over $34 million worth of luxury restored by the hands that Mr. Crawford had once mocked. But for Ethan, it wasn't just about money or recognition. Every time he fixed a car, he thought of Lily. He thought of her picture of Dad's repair shop and how one day she would see it come true. Her smile was the fuel that kept him awake when exhaustion clawed at him. Sometimes she would even sleep in the corner of the garage on a makeshift bed while he worked, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Daddy," before drifting off to sleep. The day came when a journalist from the local paper heard about Ethan's unbelievable record. The reporter showed up at his garage, surprised to find such a small, humble place buzzing with so much activity. She interviewed Ethan, asked about his journey, and took photos of the luxury cars lined up outside his little shed. Within days, the article hit the front page under the headline, "The Single Dad Who Fixes What the Dealerships Can't." The story caught fire. Customers began lining up outside his garage, some bringing luxury cars from other cities, desperate for Ethan's magic touch. His phone rang constantly with new requests. His once quiet life had turned into a whirlwind. Ethan could hardly believe it, and yet not everyone was happy. At the dealership, Crawford grew furious when he saw the article. His customers were now questioning his mechanics, asking why a man with a rusty shed could do what his team could not. Some even canceled their appointments and took their cars to Ethan instead. To Crawford, it was not just an insult. It was a threat to his empire. He dismissed it at first as luck, convinced that Ethan's streak would end. But as the weeks passed and Ethan's reputation only grew stronger, Crawford realized he had underestimated the man he once laughed at. For Ethan, however, the battle was not with Crawford. His focus remained on the work, the joy of proving to himself and to the world that skill mattered more than status. Each car that roared back to life was a victory, not just over broken machines, but over the doubt that had been forced upon him. One evening, as Ethan tucked Lily into bed, she asked him a simple question. "Daddy, are we rich now?" He chuckled softly and kissed her forehead. "Not yet, sweetheart. But we're rich in something more important. We have hope. And with hope, anything is possible." She nodded sleepily, holding his hand. "I told you, you can fix anything." And as Ethan looked at his daughter, he realized she was right. He wasn't just fixing cars, he was fixing their future. Ethan had never imagined how quickly life could change. Just months ago, he was a man struggling to keep his small garage open, praying each day that enough cars would come in to cover the bills and buy groceries for Lily. Now, his once quiet lot was constantly full of vehicles that most people would only dream of touching. Expensive cars with names like Ferrari, Bentley, Lamborghini, and Rolls-Royce waited in lines outside his broken-down shed. Customers in tailored suits and designer clothes stood patiently, something no one would have believed possible. They didn't care that the walls of the garage were patched with metal sheets or that the floor was covered in oil stains. All they cared about was that the man inside had the magic touch to bring their machines back to life. Ethan never lost his humble ways. Even as the work increased, he still greeted every customer with respect, still explained every repair in simple words, and still charged fairly. His notebook of saved cars grew thicker, with neat handwriting listing each model, its problem, and the solution he had found. By the time he reached the 47th car, even he had to pause and stare at the list. 47 cars that dealerships had given up on, 47 machines brought back to life by his own hands, and the combined worth? Over $34 million. He shook his head in disbelief. For a man who once struggled to afford rent, the number seemed unreal. It wasn't just the wealthy customers who noticed. A journalist who had written the first story returned, amazed by the growing crowd around Ethan's garage. She asked to follow him for a few days, writing about how he worked long hours, often with Lily sitting close by doing her homework, while her father tightened bolts and rewired circuits. The story was picked up by larger news outlets. Soon, television crews arrived, filming the small shed that had become a legend. Viewers across the city and even beyond watched clips of Ethan fixing luxury cars with focus and calm determination. The image of the single dad with grease on his hands and a smile on his face touched people's hearts. Lily loved every moment of it. She would wave at the cameras and proudly tell anyone who asked that her father could fix anything. She didn't care about the cars or the fame. She just cared that her father was finally being seen for the man she always knew he was. But success also brought challenges. The small garage was no longer enough. Customers complained about the long wait times, and Ethan sometimes had to work through the night just to keep up. His tools, though well kept, were old and limited. There were moments when he wished he had better equipment, machines that could make the work faster. Still, he refused to turn anyone away. To him, every car was a chance to prove himself, to show the world that he was more than what Mr. Crawford had once called him. And Crawford had noticed. At first, the CEO had brushed off Ethan's success as a temporary buzz. He told his employees that the man in the shed would soon make a mistake and lose his customers. But as months passed and Ethan's reputation only grew, Crawford felt the sting of humiliation. His own clients were whispering doubts, questioning why his highly paid mechanics couldn't do what a single dad could. Some even canceled their contracts and took their cars to Ethan instead. Crawford's empire, built on the promise of luxury and excellence, was starting to crack. Ethan, however, did not celebrate Crawford's downfall. He didn't have time for pride or revenge. All his focus was on the work and on giving Lily the life she deserved. Yet fate had other plans. One afternoon, while Ethan was bent under the hood of a rare Italian sports car, a black limousine pulled into his lot. Out stepped not a customer, but one of Crawford's board members, a man named Mr. Lawson. Lawson watched quietly as Ethan worked, impressed by the skill and patience he showed. When the car roared back to life, Lawson approached. "You're quite the mechanic, Mr. Ethan," he said with a small smile. "I've been watching your work for some time now, and I believe it's time the world sees just how much more you can do." Ethan was confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. Lawson explained that Crawford's dealership was losing credibility. The board wanted to see if Ethan truly was as talented as people claimed. So they arranged a demonstration day. Ethan would be given one of the rarest, most complicated luxury cars ever built, one that no mechanic in the dealership could repair. In front of executives, mechanics, and invited guests, Ethan would be asked to fix it. If he succeeded, they could not deny his skill. The idea terrified Ethan. He had never been comfortable in the spotlight. Cameras were one thing, but standing in front of a room full of powerful men and women, many of them waiting for him to fail, felt overwhelming. That night he sat with Lily, explaining his fears. She held his hand and whispered, "Daddy, you always told me nothing is impossible if you try. This is just another car, and you're the best." Her words gave him strength. He agreed to the challenge. On the day of the demonstration, Ethan walked into the grand hall of Crawford's dealership. The room was filled with executives in suits, mechanics in uniforms, and reporters ready to capture every moment. At the center stood the car, a rare masterpiece worth millions, its hood raised to reveal a maze of complex machinery. Ethan felt the weight of every eye on him. Crawford sat in the front row, arms crossed, a smirk on his face as if he already knew Ethan would fail. Ethan took a deep breath, rolled up his sleeves, and stepped forward. He didn't look at the crowd or the cameras. He focused only on the car. As he worked, silence filled the room. Every twist of the wrench, every adjustment of the wires, every careful movement drew people in. Hours passed, but Ethan never rushed. He trusted his instincts. the same instincts that had guided him through 47 impossible cases before. Finally, he turned the key. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Crawford's smirk grew wider, ready to declare victory. But then, with a deep rumble, the engine roared to life. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. The car shined, alive once again. Gasps filled the room. Executives stood, clapping. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing. Mechanics who had once mocked Ethan stared in awe. And Crawford, his face turned pale, his smirk gone. He had no words. Ethan didn't cheer or gloat. He simply wiped his hands, smiled softly, and looked at Lily, who was standing with Lawson at the edge of the room. She was clapping the loudest, her little face glowing with pride. In that moment, Ethan knew that no matter what happened next, he had already won the battle that mattered most. The day of the demonstration changed everything for Ethan. News spread like fire through dry grass. Videos of him reviving the rare car were shared across television stations, social media, and newspapers. Millions of people saw the single father with grease-stained hands accomplish something that experts had called impossible. He was no longer just the mechanic in a small-town garage. He had become a symbol of determination, skill, and humility. Soon, requests began to pour in faster than he could handle. Calls came from collectors who owned private fleets of rare vehicles, from celebrities with cars that had sat silent in their garages for years, and even from international clients willing to ship their vehicles across borders for his touch. His phone never stopped ringing, and his once quiet shed became a place of constant activity. Cars lined the street, sometimes so many that the police had to redirect traffic. But Ethan stayed grounded. He still greeted every customer with the same warm smile, still explained every detail of the repair in simple words, and still took the time to pat his daughter on the head when she brought him a sandwich in the middle of a long shift. To him, fame was not the prize. The real victory was that he could now see a future where Lily would never have to struggle the way he did. Reporters camped outside his garage, eager to capture every new car that rolled in, and every owner who left with tears of relief and gratitude. Interviews showed Ethan sitting humbly on a stool, telling his story not as a tale of genius but as a story of hard work, persistence, and the love of a father for his daughter. People admired him not just for his skills but for his heart. He became known as the mechanic who fixes the unfixable, and the title stuck. But not everyone was cheering. In the towering glass building of Crawford's dealership, anger boiled. Mr. Crawford had been embarrassed once in front of his executives, but now he was being embarrassed in front of the entire country. Customers began demanding that his team live up to Ethan's standard. Some wealthy clients, long loyal to his brand, openly said they preferred Ethan's garage. For a man who built his empire on prestige, this was unbearable. Crawford tried to fight back. He hired marketing teams to run flashy campaigns claiming that his dealership still offered the best service. He ordered his mechanics to study Ethan's methods, but they couldn't copy his instincts, his patience, or his willingness to work day and night until the job was done. He even spread rumors that Ethan's repairs wouldn't last, but one by one, customers returned to say their cars were running better than ever. Every attempt to damage Ethan's reputation only made people admire him more. One evening, while Ethan was cleaning tools after a long day, a group of investors approached him. They were successful businessmen who had been following his rise closely. They told him they wanted to back him financially, to build him a state-of-the-art repair facility with advanced technology, proper space, and a full team of skilled workers. "You've proven what one man can do," one of them said. "Imagine what you could do with the right resources. You could change the industry." Ethan was overwhelmed. He had dreamed of this moment for years. Back when he stood in his tiny shed imagining a bigger shop, now it was within reach, but he hesitated. He thought about the risks, the responsibility, and most of all about Lily. He didn't want to step into something that could collapse and leave her with nothing. That night he sat with her in their apartment explaining the offer. Lily, wise beyond her years, looked at him and said, "Daddy, you always tell me to be brave. Maybe now it's your turn." Her words settled the matter. Ethan shook hands with the investors the next morning. Plans moved quickly. Within weeks, construction began on a massive new facility just outside the city. Ethan visited the site every day, walking among the rising steel beams, hardly able to believe it was real. He insisted that the place not just be about machines but about people. He wanted a section where young mechanics could train, a waiting area where families felt comfortable, and a wall where every saved car would be recorded as a story of victory. As the new shop neared completion, excitement built. Newspapers called it the repair center of the future. Customers booked appointments months in advance. The grand opening was set to be a major event, with invitations sent to clients, reporters, and even public figures who had followed Ethan's story. On the day of the opening, hundreds gathered. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and cars worth millions lined the parking lot. Ethan walked into his new shop wearing the same work shirt he had worn in his shed, his sleeves rolled up, his hands still rough and calloused. He didn't want to look like a businessman in a suit. He wanted to remain the man he had always been, the mechanic who never gave up. Lily walked beside him, holding his hand proudly. Inside, people marveled at the shining floors, the rows of modern equipment, and the enormous sign that read, "Ethan's Repair, where nothing is impossible." Reporters surrounded him, asking questions, but he only smiled and said, "This is for my daughter and for every dreamer who was told they couldn't do it." Then, as the event reached its peak, a familiar figure appeared in the crowd. Mr. Crawford. The once proud CEO walked in with his usual air of authority. Though his face was harder, less confident than before, the crowd grew quiet as he approached Ethan. Cameras turned to capture every second. Crawford looked at the building, at the hundreds of people, at the cars that once belonged to his customers. His jaw tightened, but finally he extended his hand. "Congratulations, Ethan," he said, his voice controlled but heavy. "You've built something remarkable. I underestimated you." The silence was thick. Everyone waited to see how Ethan would respond. He looked at Crawford's hand, then at Lily, who gave him a small nod. Slowly, Ethan shook the CEO's hand. "When I came to you once, I didn't ask for much. I only wanted a chance. You laughed because you saw grease on my hands. But these hands built this. Not with money. With trust. With hard work. And with faith that nothing is impossible." The crowd erupted in applause. Crawford stepped back, his pride wounded but his acknowledgement given. Ethan turned back to his daughter, lifting her into his arms. She clapped her hands and whispered, "I told you, Daddy, you can fix anything." In that moment, Ethan realized that the true repair he had made was not just of broken cars. He had repaired his own dignity, his own faith, and the life he wanted for Lily. And that was worth more than all the millions combined. The grand opening of Ethan's new repair shop was only the beginning. The excitement of that day carried far beyond the walls of the gleaming new facility. News networks broadcasted the story of the single dad who had once been laughed at, but who now stood at the center of a business worth millions. People from across the country reached out, offering congratulations, asking for advice, and even applying for jobs at his shop. For Ethan, it was surreal. He had spent years in a small shed, fighting to keep the lights on, and now he was running one of the most talked-about businesses in the automotive world. Despite the fame and attention, Ethan remained the same humble man he had always been. He still arrived before sunrise, his sleeves rolled up and his hands ready to work. He still greeted customers personally, whether they arrived in a rusty pickup truck or a luxury car worth millions. To him, every vehicle was a story, every customer a person in need, and every repair an opportunity to prove that no challenge was too great. His shop was filled with state-of-the-art equipment, but what impressed people most was his dedication and the way he treated everyone with respect. Lily loved the new shop. She had her own small corner, a desk where she could do her homework and walls decorated with drawings she made of cars and tools. Ethan often joked that she was his assistant manager, and she proudly told everyone that one day she would run the place with him. Watching her smile in the middle of the bustling shop was the greatest reward Ethan could ever ask for. Customers continued to bring him the most challenging cases. Cars that had been abandoned in garages for years, machines others had declared unfixable, and vehicles so rare that parts had to be handmade. Ethan tackled each case with the same patience and determination he had shown in his shed. And just like before, he succeeded, one car at a time. People began to say that bringing a broken car to Ethan was like bringing a sick patient to the best doctor in the world. If anyone could save it, he could. The reputation of Ethan's repair shop soon spread overseas. Wealthy collectors from other countries sent their cars across oceans just to have them repaired by him. His name became known in circles that once would have ignored a man like him. Industry magazines wrote articles calling him the genius mechanic. But Ethan always shook his head and said, "I'm just a man who doesn't give up." Meanwhile, Mr. Crawford's dealership continued to struggle. The humiliation of losing customers to Ethan was something the CEO could never fully recover from. His empire was not what it used to be. Though he still had money and influence, the shine of his reputation had faded. More importantly, people remembered the way he had mocked a man who only wanted a chance. His laugh had become a symbol of arrogance, while Ethan's persistence had become a symbol of hope. One day, a journalist asked Ethan what message he wanted people to take from his story. He thought for a moment, then said, "Never let someone else decide your worth. I was told I wasn't good enough, but I kept going. If you work hard, stay honest, and believe in yourself, no amount of laughter or doubt can stop you." The word spread widely, inspiring people far beyond the world of cars. Letters poured in from young mechanics, single parents, and even students who said his story gave them courage to chase their own dreams. Though business was booming, Ethan never forgot his promise to make his shop about more than money. He created a training program for young mechanics who couldn't afford expensive schools. He taught them not just how to fix cars, but how to work with patience, creativity, and respect. Machines will change, he told them, but honesty and skill will always matter. For many of these young people, Ethan became more than a teacher. He became a mentor and a role model. There were challenges, of course. Running a large shop came with responsibilities he had never faced before. Payroll, supplies, customer expectations. At times it felt overwhelming. But whenever he doubted himself, he would look at Lily. She reminded him why he had started, why he had fought through the laughter, and why he could never stop now. Her belief in him was still the greatest strength he carried. As the years passed, Ethan's shop became more than a business. It became a landmark, a place people visited not just to repair cars, but to witness a story of resilience. Tourists sometimes stopped by just to take photos in front of the sign that read, "Where nothing is impossible." Ethan always smiled when he saw them. To him, the sign wasn't just about cars. It was about life. One summer evening, after a long day of work, Ethan and Lily sat outside the shop, watching the sun set behind the rows of luxury cars waiting for repairs. Lily leaned against him and said, "Daddy, do you remember when Mr. Crawford laughed at you?" Ethan nodded, smiling softly. "I remember," he said, "and now," she continued, "everyone knows you're the best. Doesn't it feel good?" Ethan looked at her, his heart full. "It feels good," he admitted. "But do you know what feels even better? Knowing that I never gave up. That's what makes me proud." She hugged him tightly, and in that moment Ethan realized that his true victory wasn't the cars he had fixed or the millions his shop had made. It was the example he had set for his daughter, the lesson that no matter how hard life laughed at you, if you stood firm, believed in yourself, and worked with your whole heart, you could turn laughter into applause. Years later, when people told the story of the single dad who fixed the unfixable, they often focused on the numbers. 47 cars worth $34 million. The empire he built afterward, the fame he gained. But those who knew him best knew the real story. They knew it was about a man who faced humiliation and refused to let it define him. A man who used his hands, his skills, and his love for his daughter to carve out a future no one thought possible. And every night, as he locked up his gleaming new shop and walked hand in hand with Lily, Ethan whispered the same words he had once said when the world doubted him. "These hands may look rough, but they can build dreams.